Welcome back to my channel, and thanks for checking out my Diablo 4 videos. Today, let's talk about the rogue, namely the Dance of Knives rogue. A buddy of mine on the Diablo 4 Discord server thought a Dance of Knives only run wasn't possible. So, naturally, that got my interest piqued. At first, I honestly thought the run was going to be way more difficult than it was, since I wasn't going to have access to things like imbuement and mobility skills, two categories of skills that are usually very, very important for a rogue. But, like most builds in this game, there always seems to be a way to work around those kinds of limitations, and Dance of Knives is no exception. Uniques and aspects end up providing more than enough synergy damage to hit Torment 4, and overall I had a blast during this run. There's something satisfying about the whole spin-to-win nature of Dance of Knives and just seeing tens of millions in damage ticks hitting enemies nonstop. But enough talk, let's go over my gear, my skills, and my Paragon before we get to the Torment 4 pit run. So, before we talk about the gear I used during my run, there's one thing to note. I don't really grind or farm on these runs to make sure I'm 12 of 12 masterworking or triple critting on the most important affixes. A lot of times I'm actually using gear from other builds that I happen just to have lying around in my stash. My goal is to really see how quickly I can get to Torment 4, and my gear a lot of times reflects that. For my helmet, I chose Endaril's Visage, which is probably a bit outside of the norm. But the goal was I really wanted to find a way to gain access to poison damage since I wasn't able to take the poison imbuement from the skill tree. Using Endaril's Visage meant that I could put skill points into and take advantage of those specific point focus passives in the tree. I couldn't proc poison on my own from, like, say, a skill, but Endaril's Visage made sure I was procking poison damage almost continuously thanks to my super lucky hit chance. And once that damage procced, I was taking advantage of those passives that I had put points into before. When it came to my chest armor, I ran into another challenge in the fact that I was going to be lacking in damage reduction, especially considering I didn't have direct access to equip skills like Dark Shroud. However, the great thing is that the Umbrous aspect actually gave me a high chance to gain a Dark Shroud every time I critically hit an enemy, which proved to be incredibly useful and incredibly frequent given my lucky hit chance. I also tempered on additional ranks of Dark Shroud to improve that damage reduction, as well as tempered on additional Fortified Generation for extra protection. For my gloves, the Fists of Fate helped a ton in terms of that lucky hit chance and making enemies vulnerable. Plus, the critical strike chance and attack speed didn't hurt, along with the chance to deal 295% additional damage thanks to that really good aspect roll. With so much of my damage conditional on lucky hit, I needed to make sure I had extremely high chance for it to proc, and the Fists of Fate made sure that happened almost every single time. For my pants, the Disobedience aspect helped me stack armor, while ranks and chilling weight helped me make sure that I was able to further crowd control enemies who would be slowed down even more as I procced chill on them. And to round things off, I added on tempers for more armor and resistance to elements because survivability is always good. To further improve that chill damage, I chose the Penitent Greaves boots, and that ended up being a solid choice. The extra movement speed helped me weave through enemy groups super fast, and the extra chill slope potency meant I was freezing enemies almost instantly. Add to that even more critical strike chance against chilled enemies, and I was turning entire groups into ice with every single hit. Weapons are a key part of any build, and for these kinds of challenge runs, they end up being really the most important synergy focal point for a lot of the aspects I have on my gear. This bow, which I chose for its implicit critical strike damage, ended up being a powerhouse thanks to the two tempers. One that increased the chance of Dance of Knives dealing double damage, and one that buffed my damage even more for every Dark Shroud that I currently have. Since my lucky hit chance was turning most of my critical hits into a Dark Shroud, I was basically guaranteed to always have that extra damage buff be active. The Star Shards aspect helped as well, ensuring that almost every single one of my knives were splitting and hitting additional enemies with every cast. My first offhand was the Azarath, with Master working on its lucky hit chance to deal cold damage. This, paired with my Fists of Fate and Penitent Greaves, meant I was proccing chill and freeze almost nonstop, either slowing enemies dramatically or outright freezing them. Pairing this with my very high attack speed and the fact that Dance of Knives is a channeled skill and can basically be used non-stop, I was dealing out like frozen death at a crazy rate. My second offhand was a sword for, again, that extra critical damage. I also used the same tempers that I used on my bow to help squeeze out even more damage from Dance of Knives and damage from the Dark Shrouds that I had. The aspect Noxious Ice was great because it put both my poison and chill damage into perfect synergy and really amplified both. For my first ring, I went with the Ring of Starless Skies. And while the core skills affix and aspect are basically useless, since I don't use a core skill and I don't use any skills that use resource, the ring really shines because of the lucky hit chance, critical strike chance, and attack speed. For my second ring, I focused on getting even more attack speed and more damage. I had tempers on for damage per Dark Shroud and lucky chance to inflict vulnerable to make sure that all of those knives I was throwing were doing the maximum amount of damage possible. The aspect True Sight also took advantage of the rogue specialization skill Inner Sight, which again just got me more critical and overall damage. Lastly, my amulets stacked on the passives, and even though I didn't masterwork any of them, they still contributed a ton of damage. Frigid Finesse was a straight damage boost to chilled and frozen enemies, and Chilling Weight, again, with crowd control and slowing enemies down. The Vengeful aspect added another damage bucket with frequent arrow storms thanks to a very high lucky hit chance. So, as you can see, while I didn't have access to hard skills like Poison or Chill, it was very easy to gain access to those damage types through gears, aspects, skills, and more. The net result was a veritable whirlwind that tossed out knives at lightning speed that almost immediately froze enemies and made them vulnerable to even more damage. It was a great build. Now that I've walked through the gear I used for the build, let's go to the video of me running through Pit Tier 55 to unlock Torment 4. Thanks again for watching the video.
Damn!